Hello everyone and welcome to what might be the final episode from the series of things you may have missed in The Witcher 3. I'll go deeper into what that means towards the end, because nobody likes premature lollygagging, so I shall only remind you that there are nearly 200 videos in my Witcher Details playlist, and if you've missed any of them, you can have a look at the link in the description. And with that out of the way, let's get started with number 1. It's a handful of things really, brought to us by a viewer called Sasha Lemova, if I'm pronouncing it right. First off, have you noticed that there is a large rock formation not far from Lindenvale in Velen in the shape of a face? Some bandits are camping around it, and it's something I never took note of despite passing by the area a million times. It has eyes, a nose, and even a mouth, the cavity of which can be seen from the side, and it's just rather awesome, if I may say so. Reminds me a bit of the Skellige lines, of which I made a video many years ago, and I'm bringing them back up for a reason, because the rest of what Sasha shared is indeed in Skellige. She claims that there are 2 more rock formations right around where the Nilfgaardians are camping during the ending of the game, in the shape of a cat and a dog. And I'll admit, I was rather unwilling to believe that those actually depict anything. I went to look at the dog first, and as hard as I struggled, I couldn't really make it out. But then I looked at what was supposed to be the cat, and I sort of saw it. It's lying down and has its head turned to the side. After noticing that, I could kind of see the dog too, even if I still think it looks less obvious. And I'm really curious if these rocks actually depict anything, or if they're just our brains playing tricks, seeing patterns where none exist. I mean, I'm convinced that the face in Velen is an actual face, but these rocks, who knows? Do tell me what you think about them. I'm sure I never would have noticed them naturally. And one more thing Sasha brought up is a sort of addition to the lines I mentioned. Some of them can be seen drawn or carved into the rocks. For example, here, not far from the Druids' camp, and also up the hill where the Noon Shadow puzzle is. I've mentioned it in previous episodes, basically exactly at noon, the shadow of these pointy rocks points at a treasure chest down in the valley. With that said, we move on to something else which wasn't entirely clear, until now I suppose, and it's another detail brought to you by a viewer by the name of Rob. It relates to my worst quest in The Witcher 3 video, where I talked at length about my issues with Lambert's quest, involving Jad Karadin and all that. So the gentleman I mentioned was digging through the names of different character models. He may have been aided by the Redkit tools, but one way or another he stumbled upon the character of the wife, and apparently the name of it is Fake Wife. So I guess now we have confirmation that, at least initially, the wife and kids scene was indeed supposed to be a setup. In the video I also mentioned the sword she carries as a potential clue. Sadly, that doesn't really help fix any of the issues I have with the quest, but it is definitely a curious clue, and I still believe that the whole story was initially supposed to play out differently than what we currently have. If you haven't seen the video, I do recommend you have a look. But thanks once again to Rob, and we move on to the next detail. This one is made possible, or rather more convenient, with the help of the Brothers in Arms mod, which I've mentioned on several occasions already, and it is about the wolf and cat quest with the Witcher who massacres the village. If you have the Brothers in Arms mod installed by the time you enter Velen for the first time, you will have 2 in-game days to visit the village of Honorton while it's still intact.
Can you do that? Oh my! Nice pendant you got!
After that time has passed, it will transition into its infested and deserted state.
Quiet here.
And the quest will become available.
And it stinks of carrion. Not good. Necrophages. Great.
This was actually the way the village appeared before the free DLC was released, Sadly, none of the main characters of the quest are available for interaction at this point. I imagine some of you aren't even aware that a small chunk of the game was released as free DLC within the first 3 or so months after the launch, and it was soon made part of the base game, you know, when the complete editions, Game of the Year editions and so on started coming out. So this quest was actually part of the free DLC program, and the intact village is technically still in the game if you manage to get it installed without this quest. The Brothers in Arms simply offers the best of both worlds, so to speak. If you wish to download it, you can check the link in the description. And if you are wondering why I've been running around with all kinds of characters instead of Geralt, it's because while making this video, I've also been testing and providing some feedback for the custom player characters mod, which is quite promising, and I will likely make a video about it soon.
Why'd you kill these people? Clearly wasn't for their blood.
It was developed after years of work by the gentleman behind the contract for Oriana, another wonderful mod you may have seen. All of these will be in the description as well. I believe he's currently looking for some voice actors, so if anyone's interested, feel free to reach out. And now that I've started promoting things, I think it's a pretty good time to bring up today's sponsor. Or at least it would have been if I had one. But since I don't, I will instead ask you to give this video a like if you've been enjoying it so far, and perhaps to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. I've also got a Patreon and a YouTube membership with absolutely no benefits for the most hardcore of my viewers, to whom I'm extremely grateful, and let's get back into the video. Speaking of Crow's Perch, I suppose we haven't really spoken about it, but that's where you normally pick up the wolf and cat quest. There are at least a couple of details here which I don't think I've mentioned over the years. One of them is about the Shrieker Contract, where you kill the nearby cockatrice, who's responsible for the death of this boy's father. There are a couple of small things you may have missed. One is that you can talk to the boy once again after finishing the quest and grant him some solace.
Keep the coin. You took in an orphan. Need it more than I do.
And they call witches unfeeling, inhuman. Well, I thank ye, from the bottom of my heart.
What?
Your father's been avenged. Thought you might want to know. I killed the Shrieker.
Thank you, Master Witcher.
And the other one is that he won't talk to you if you start killing the goats nearby.
People! People!
Although this is only temporary, if you reload the save next to him or simply go away and come back, he will be interactable once again.
Let me be.
The next couple of details here revolve around the Baron's men and the quest where you meet them for the first time in the Crossroads. One thing you may have missed is that if you never went to the Crossroads but found Henrik instead, you'll get a unique interaction when visiting the Baron's castle.
Halt! Who goes there?
Baron home?
Depends who's asking.
A witcher. Want to talk to him.
Yeah. And I want to plough the lovely Queen Cero.
Gonna let me in or not?
Hey, no passage for the likes of you.
Seems to me we ought to be able to come to some sort of agreement.
All right. In you go. But cause any trouble, and we'll gut you faster than you can say Nilfgaardian vendetta. Open the gate. Sergeants. Ardle. Witcher to see the Baron. Don't want no disturbances. That clear?
What do you think?
Sadly, there's nothing new if you refuse to pay and then find your own way in. And another curious thing which I hadn't noticed until recently, when a viewer, whose name I won't even attempt to pronounce, mentioned it, is that even if you manage to resolve things with them peacefully at the Crossroads, you can still get into a fight with the Baron's men if you pester them long enough.
One round, you said, and that were it. Now sod off. If it's human speech you don't understand, I'll explain it with iron, you bastard.
And speaking of these earliest sections of Velen, I'd like to go back to the previous episode in the series for a moment, where I showed you a folded piece of the physical Witcher 3 map within the game. That was on the table of the Eternal Fire Priest. Since then, many of you, including the person who originally shared this with me, have found other instances of the map in the game, with the biggest likely being in the Herbalist's basement, where you prepare for the heist in Hearts of Stone. That room, by the way, has several curious details, like Triss being one of the potential accomplices, unique dialogue if you show up here in a mask, and so on. Have a look at the previous episodes for those. Now we continue with a couple more details brought to us once again by a viewer, this time by the name of Botchling. He has been featured on the channel before, and he shared at least 2 more curious things with me. The first one is a sketch that can be found on the table of the Nilfgaardian captain in White Orchard. It seems to depict a concept for the map of the zone. The only word I can both recognize and understand here would be this one. It means bridge, if it wasn't obvious enough. I'd appreciate if anyone else can translate all the inscriptions, which I imagine are in Polish, but nevertheless, it's a wonderful detail. And the second thing he shared with me is the existence of this man in The Witcher 3.
Greetings.
Greeting, my lord, greeting.
What's with you?
Well, not now, but when I was 6, a brick fell on me head. I was playing a game where you toss a brick in the air, counted 5 and ran so the brick wouldn't bop you. Never was good at counting. They say the brick made me stupid.
He was originally in the first game, and there is a small Easter egg of him in the third as well, right over here at the edge of this settlement.
By Vizima. Oi, that were the brickworks.
This settlement is actually one of the few places where a curious piece of ambient dialogue can be heard, likely referring to the Botchling.
Your old lady just grown fat, or is she with child again?
Shite, look, aye. Another bantling on the way.
Let's keep her close. You heard of the vampire?
Ah, shut your trap.
Got any victuals? Hungry like a wolf I am.
And speaking of viewers sharing details that bridge between different Witcher games, here's something curious that I personally was unable to recreate. It comes from Mr. Alexander, he has also been featured before, who found what he thinks is Elthon from The Witcher 2 in White Orchard.
Yes, you're beautiful, my queen, my lady. You're a wondrous sight. All in your nest envy you.
He has 2 lines outside of his quest.
You're strange, but a good fellow nonetheless. At your service. You're strange, but a good fellow nonetheless. At your service.
And Mr. Alexander found an NPC who has the exact same 2 lines.
You're strange, but a good fella nonetheless. At your service.
He claims he was unable to find anyone else, neither in The Witcher 2 or The Witcher 3, who had these same responses, which is truly a compelling argument that it is meant to be the same person. The issue for me was that I could never encounter this NPC in The Witcher 3. No matter how many saves I loaded, I never met him at this location of White Orchard, and the people I stumbled upon instead always had different lines.
I've been about like shit in a blowhole. Good eye to you, good eye. Greetings.
Well, yeah. Welcome to our shithole.
Hey, man.
So I'm not sure what to make of this. It is quite likely that it was meant as an Easter egg, or maybe Elthon was intended to be a part of the game but was dropped eventually. I suppose it could also be a case of some developers simply copy-pasting the ambient dialogue from one Witcher 2 character to another Witcher 3 character. Who knows? Do tell me if you've stumbled upon this person in White Orchard, but it is an interesting case for sure. At any rate, with that, I believe I'm done for now. I did mention in the beginning that this is likely the last episode of the series, and it may truly be the case. There are still a few details that I'm holding on to for the 10th anniversary of The Witcher 3. I've been making videos on every anniversary and I definitely can't skip the 10th, which is in 8 or 9 months. And additionally, I do have more ideas for videos, perhaps similar to the ones I made about following the thread or reason of state. There are also curious mods to look into.
Run, Roach!
There will likely be more about curious cut content, so it's not like this is my last Witcher 3 video, but in terms of this specific format, I am somewhat sadly truly running out of details. People have been telling me that I'm clearly running out of things to talk about since my Details in Blood and Wine videos, which was over 5 years ago I think, so they were clearly wrong then, but it's turning out to be the case now. One thing I've had on my mind recently is that it would be nice to cover certain things more in depth than I've done in the past. Oftentimes when I respond to comments, I end up rewatching parts of my old videos, and sometimes I wish I could get another shot at covering some things, because I've since learned even more. So perhaps dedicating a few videos to well-deserving details that were underappreciated by me in the past is something I could do. On the other hand, I've always tried not to repeat myself to the best of my ability and to find and cover things that I haven't talked about in the past. In that sense, I've also been thinking of finally playing Baldur's Gate 3. Many of you have been telling me to do so, and I think I've said it before, I've played about 200 hours of it in early access, but I've yet to try the released game, and I'm almost afraid to do it, funny as it may sound, both because I know how huge it is, and also because I'm afraid I won't like it as much as I'd like to. The truth is, I was able to make all these Witcher 3 videos mostly because I love the game so much. To this day, as I mentioned, when responding to comments or when recording something else, I find myself listening to dialogue, to which I've listened to 100 times before, and I worry that if I don't end up liking Baldur's Gate 3 as much, I won't be able to make videos about it. It's basically what happened to Cyberpunk for me, but I'm quite certain that I will give it an honest try and see how it goes. Meanwhile, those of you who are still watching can tell me how you feel about all this, both the details and the rambling at the end, and I thank you very much for watching. Special thanks to my supporters and YouTube members, and until the next video, stay tuned and be good.